So this is just explaining some things about how lifespan works. And on the second page down here in the first full paragraph, it says, up to the top, secure attachment, right here, top of the second page. So just see if some of this sounds familiar from the work we were doing last month, all right? Remember the little baby was holding the baby doll? Secure attachment in humans is engendered beginning at birth through an interactive process between parent and child. A securely attached parent is able to meet the early attachment needs of her newborn infant. An infant who's loved and cared for will understand at a deep level that he is important, lovable, and valuable. He will grow up to be a securely attached adult. Human babies are born in a very vulnerable, unfinished state with largely undeveloped nervous systems. Newborn babies are designed to be in constant contact with their mothers. Parents who had their own early needs met are usually capable of providing their infants with the physical and emotional environments conducive to optimal growth and development. A securely attached mother is able to remain attuned to her infant. Remember this left eye to left eye attachment? Attuned to her infant. And this attunement allows the forming nervous system of the infant to sufficiently download and internalize the needed neural structures for affect regulation, so for control of their own emotions, their own affect, and self-love. This interactive process continues for the first few years of a child's life as his nervous system develops. And then going on, the emotional regulation is learned within the parent-infant dyad. That's how the baby learns how to control their own emotions, is because the parent is helping them. The attuned mother holds her infant within a tolerable range of motions. Eventually, the developing child internalizes this ability, so the baby is able to do that. Parents who are unable to regulate their own emotions are not able to attune with and regulate the emotions of their babies. Likewise, parents who are insecurely attached will unintentionally pass their insecure attachment styles onto their children. Even a very responsible and well-intentioned parent, if insecurely attached, will lack the coherence needed to bring about a solid and secure self-structure in his or her child. In addition, when infants and small children experience early trauma or neglect without the support of attuned and protective caregivers, they're unable to integrate segments of their experience. Without coherent autobiographical narrative, these individuals will grow up without a solid sense of self. Then the resulting fragmentation can end up later dissociative identity disorder, dissociative disorder not otherwise specified. So, what this is telling us in that very beginning part where it says that that a child is in a very vulnerable, unfinished state with an underdeveloped or an undeveloped nervous system. So what we know is those little babies and us at one point, we grew in that little undeveloped state, and we had what was kind of known as self states. We developed like this. Like if this is our cohesive whole, if you will, we developed with all these little states kind of disconnected, and then ideally, when we were being attuned to, we learned how to get these all connected so that we could be a cohesive self, okay? Now, if the person who was caring for us didn't have a cohesive self, theirs was like this too, then we're not going to get all of that security in place, okay? Now, as we go along, like the Healing Timeline book says, we grow like the rings of a tree. So here, let's just say this is year 1, and then let's say that it's sort of like that again as year 2, and we have these continued places where things happen in our lives that we're not exactly sure what to do with. We don't exactly know. The teacher yells at us for some reason that we have no idea what it is. We don't know what we did wrong. And no one is there to explain to us that we were dragging our coat down the hall and making a mess or whatever, you know. I mean, nobody talks to us about what exactly was going on. So we're not able to kind of get these things connected and understand. And ideally, this would be like this, you know. I mean, there'd just be so many neural connections all through all of this that eventually this would just, you know, we just all of this would be connected as far as our neurons go, okay? So when we are, the way this was before I drew all over it, and we come to do healing timeline work, healing timeline does this. It goes out there and it gets those neural things, those little parts of us, or those little memories that didn't get fully connected, and it causes them to fire together, one right after the other, and when it fires, it gets them all wired together. And then eventually we have this sense of this like cohesive self deep inside of us, or all the way back in our history forward, okay? And then just imagine you've got your 3 and you've got your 4, and of course it's not flat, it's sort of like, I don't know, in my mind it's sort of like a vortex, you know, with all of these years, and we just get more and more connections as we go out. Now, if we didn't get those connections when we were growing, and we get to look at the pictures from one year to the next, we begin to have a cohesive sense of self internally. So I wanted to pull this off of the Lifespan Integration website because it's so close to the things that we talked about last month with understanding how that interaction takes place. And then understanding why would we need or want, or why would there be any benefit to going through our timeline, is because things that were never connected in the first place get connected. There's a definition of mental health that is a cohesive sense of self through time and space. A cohesive sense of self through time and space. Now, some of us, or sometimes, we might have a cohesive sense of self up to age 8 when my family moved across the country, and then 9, 10, and 11 are sort of a mess, and then from 12 to 22, I might get a cohesive sense of self again. But here's this time in here where family was in trauma, nobody was really talking to me about what was going on, no one was helping me integrate things when I was having trouble at school. And so I don't have a cohesive sense of self throughout my entire lifespan. Or there could be no cohesive sense of self anywhere along that. You know, I just have these isolated memories, and they've all gotten stored out in these places that don't connect and don't make sense. And when we try to talk our way into it, we don't get there. But if we look at the images, one age after the other, over and over again, our brain fires, the memories start to break through, we begin to have that sense of who I was at my earliest memory, which for me, I thought my earliest memory was 5, but in Lifespan Integration or in Healing Timeline, I came to remember my earliest memory is 4, and then I'm able to actually have a cohesive sense of who I have been all the way through. Now, in my own experience, a lot of my sense of self was around school. And a lot of times people will have memories around school. In some situations, school is a safe place, and in some situations, it's not a safe place. But my cohesive sense of self might have been pretty good in school, but I don't have anything in the periphery that goes around that, okay? Well, we start with what we have, and then eventually, as we continue to do timelines, either through healing timeline work or as we're looking at it on our own, these things all begin to get connected, and then I do begin to have a cohesive sense of self from my very earliest memory up to the present. So that is something that I have seen happen in my own life using just the pictures, the memories from my life. And it's about being able to get all of these self states, all of these memories that aren't quite connected. They all get connected in such a way that we actually feel solid on the inside. Does that make sense, or is that confusing? Michelle?
You mentioned that you used this on a 5-year-old. What would that look like from a better situation? How can we prevent, or what is something we can do with the child consistently so that we know this is happening in their life?
So the 5-year-old was waking up with dreams, so having nightmare kind of situation, and they were kind of in a it was a custody thing, so kind of in a traumatic place. I think you asked a couple of questions. One thing is that when we do it with children, we want about 4 cues per year. So I usually tie them to the seasons, or cue like every couple of months or something, 4 to 6 times per year. Because if they're only 5 years old, then you're there in 3 cues. So whenever it's with children, there's more cues for age. If the child has experienced something that they're having difficulty with, you can do timeline work with them. Kathy Thorpe is it should still be on a task. She is going to be releasing a book, I think, about case studies with children, maybe. And so I haven't seen it yet hit Amazon or anything like that, but I'm anxious for that to come about. She's done a lot of work with children. Then, as far as how could we keep things from happening, I did timeline work with my children because they would let me, as far as like sessions or whatever, like even when they were older. And sometimes you can just make it a game with younger children. I mean, my kids were teenagers mostly when we started doing it, but you can make it a game with the child. Do you remember do you remember when you did this? Do you remember when you did this? Do you remember when you did this? Can you, do you see that memory in your mind? And you're just helping them actually go through the timeline as you're guiding them through. That in itself is going to produce some stability, and then it becomes a game, and sometimes they want to do it for no reason. Can we do that game again, kind of thing? So you could do things like that would sort of help children in our worlds have some stability built in. And then, I guess doing it with my children was like teenage years when they were working through stuff, struggling through stuff, and we went ahead and made timelines for all of them, and they just kind of let me be their therapist mom, when they hit something difficult, and they still do that sometimes, but I kept timelines on all of them, and we did timeline work for all of them, and I just feel like the overall stability that brought was really, really significant and helpful to them. Does that hit all of those places?
So would it be beneficial, what I'm hearing you say, sound like I'm wrong, so like if we do family dinner every Sunday, we picked one thought for each month, or whatever, and just kind of ran through that as a family for these kids to be present, that would be beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
It seems like it would bring about unity.
Create what?
Create unity.
Yes, and community and connection and shared experience. Okay? Most of the time, when these things don't get talked about, they just become problematic. And it would have been an excellent time to create a shared experience because we talked about something that had happened, whether it was difficult or good, but that kind of shared experience is really important to the continuing development for memory and the continued development of a sense of cohesiveness over the course of their lives.
I think clarification, because if somebody saw it a certain way and said, I thought you were doing this, then you can clarify to them.
Just an interesting thing, you were talking about this. So my brother was a teacher in California, a high school teacher, and on his prep period, they asked him to take the kids that are last chance kids that they had to go this during his prep, his room and catch up on math or science or whatever, or they wouldn't graduate. And he got in the first day and there's 26 kids. And he said, how do I help all these kids that could care less?
Yeah.
And he said, so he just felt like the Lord said, everybody pick out a piece of paper and write what you remember from 0 to 5. And he just made them do it. And they're all like, what? And they didn't want to do it, but he said, that's the assignment today. Write what you remember. And they started writing and they turned them in, and he would go home and bawl while reading their stories. And he just had them walk through all the way up to the age they were now. And he wrote a book on that experience and called The Roots of Apathy. You can get it on Amazon. It's called The Roots of Apathy and How to Help Kids Come from Apathy and to Wanting to Learn.
Wow.
Because of he said, when you find out that mom was getting beat by a drunk dad last night, why would they come to school and want to learn that?
Yeah.
They can't. And 2 kids had traveled across the United States and were in school for 2 years and nobody knew they didn't have any parents. And he found out through doing that exercise. So it's all their life experience. But he walked them through that and then started passing their classes.
Wow.
Because they were able to work through it. But he said he could then work with them where they were.
That is huge. Yes.
And they needed a workbook for teachers and people working with kids to be able to ask the right questions to get them doing. So it's called The Roots of Apathy by Michael Pitts.
Okay.
So it's really cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Good. Good. Nice confirmations.
You might not have known he was doing that, but that's what he was doing.
Okay. Yeah. I knew because he was doing training for other people.
Yeah.
Right. But I had no idea that it was
Yeah.
pulling things from their past.
How do you spell that last name?
Michael Pitts, Hicks.
Okay.